The biggest information event in Star Citizen every year is CitizenCon. Every October on the anniversary of the Kickstarter for this game, we get the biggest info drop of the year showing what the next year of gameplay will look like, and a bit beyond. While they struggle to stick to these more realistic ideas, they've gotten better at it lately. But to understand more of that, you can check out my supporter exclusive video released to this channel in the coming days. This year looks to be a wide-ranging look at how gameplay will change with the next major patch, 4.0. If you'd like a live analysis of the actual event on the day of, make sure to RSVP to my live stream where I'll be hosting ship giveaways and answering questions, and be sure to get involved in my current ongoing giveaways as well on my live streams. Otherwise, here's a summary of what we might see at the event. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. The first stage of this event will be focusing on the planets and locales of the new star system. This will be a good opportunity for us to understand how much planets may actually start to vary now that Planetech is in a more complete state. We already have seen almost all of the planets in Engine, Pyro 1 being a black, desolate world, Pyro 2 a red and white, quote-unquote haunted planet, Pyro 3 an oxygen-rich world with lush yellow foliage, Pyro 4 is a brown desert planet that still looks different from Daymar. Pyro 5 is a vivid gas giant, and Pyro 6 is completely unknown to us outside of concept art. Each of these planets will likely be more unique than something like Hurston, with biome generation, height map editing, and the overall planet creation process being more robust and detailed than during Stanton's creation. I expect to hear more about the outpost options, unique land formations, and the actual lore behind these locations. It doesn't look like we'll be seeing every single location, but we should be getting a pretty good overview. If you'd like an early look beforehand, you can check out my recent video detailing all we know already. The second talk of the day will be about the new investigation mission archetype. This is a mission type that has existed in different forms in the game, from the old missions of Tessa Bannister to the Covalix shipping hub catastrophe to the little tasks of finding dead bodies down in the depths of the caves. This sounds different though. Mission creation and the way they are tied into locations has changed over the last 2 years. Comparing bunker missions to the derelict reclaimer missions proves as much. With the narrative team fully ingrained into these tasks and the missions becoming more complex, this is a good sign for players that want to run regular assigned missions but aren't necessarily looking for combat. What we see here likely won't be in the game soon, but it still will be a very important indicator of how the team wants Star Citizen missions to play out going forward. Something we haven't had the best idea about before this year, outside of the fake CitizenCon demos. Back in 2018, we got what was basically the first real gameplay demo that represented an in-depth Star Citizen experience. Cities, ships, mission givers, and a new location, the underground bunker. For 4 years, that underground bunker has been one of the primary locations of gameplay in the game. We've seen some small adjustments to the areas, but nothing major. The third panel this year will provide us with an in-depth look into the corporations, commerce, and caverns of our new upgraded underground facilities. This will be a reimagining of the areas we already know, likely with much larger areas, better layouts for AI spawning, some mix-ups in traversal and entrance to the locations, and different themes ranging from corporate areas to possibly abandoned facilities, which could make for great exploration potential. We have seen several mentions of how in-depth this rework is going, with mentions of the surface entrance elevators and new interactables and props. But what will be key here is if they talk about resource management or other features in regards to these locations. Definitely keeping an eye out for the new gameplay possibilities being touted here. For the longest time, read 10 years, Star Citizen has been all over the place with its flight model. From cruise mode to proximity mode to hover mode to high-speed changes to in-atmosphere aerodynamics, things have been hectic. During this time, the community has been more uncertain than happy or sad with the changes. It has been hard to get a fix on how flight should ultimately feel. The fourth panel of CitizenCon looks like it will be diving into the latest changes to flight in the game, but it sounds a bit different from before. Instead of changing the way the ships actually work, it sounds like this change-up will be more dedicated to defining specific flight modes, changing the experience, and more directly categorizing how each ship type flies in certain scenarios. I'm expecting this will touch on some of the major changes we've been reading about in monthly reports. Things like the new quantum travel mode, which includes quantum boosting, the purported changes that devs have been talking about in order to slow down combat, or maybe if we're lucky, the atmospheric flight model update with aerodynamic changes that will affect your ship handling. Given the names on this panel, from vehicle programmer David Coulson to gameplay programmer Yogi Klatt, this seems like the most in-depth panel of the whole show. It will probably have the biggest impact on immediate gameplay whenever the changes do come, and will spell out some meaningful changes for the game going forward. What I'm not so sure about is if this will touch on the new potential VTOL mode I covered in my recent supporter exclusive video, or the heat system as a whole, which is meant to have a major impact on how we fly. This is an important panel to catch, no matter what kind of pilot you are. The fifth panel of the show will be looking at Loreville, the oldest city in the game. Every landing zone since this edition has made good progress on improving the experience of city going, aside maybe from finding the spaceport. And thus, Loreville, being 4 years old, is due for a polish pass. It does sound like this will be much deeper than a simple polish pass though. There is talk of new neighborhoods being added to the area, likely spreading out the footprint of the city and introducing new public transit routes. New outskirts have been developed, probably in line with the shantytown that was already there, adding a different sense of scale to the city as a whole. Speaking of scale, we can also expect the buildings populating the city to completely change. The existent buildings are old assets that were made as a proof of concept all the way back in 2017 for an ArcCorp mockup. What will be added instead will likely be larger buildings, some of which will have interiors similar to what we've seen at Orison, providing new areas to explore and use for various mission types and activities. The next panel is likely the most important of the day. I'll just put that out there up front. Resource management is one of the biggest gameplay features that has ever been added to the game. It defines multi-crew gameplay, and it starts to impart the consequences of choosing bigger ships just because they're big. In this discussion, I expect to hear more about the actual task of shifting around resources, how life support will work in ships, the balance of our power plant, fuel tank, and batteries, the fire hazards these things may cause, and the implications of multi-crew gameplay with the new engineer profession coming online with this feature. The bonus here is that it's not just a ship-exclusive feature. The resource network is a system that will drive all inhabited places, from space stations to outposts, even possibly to city areas such as we've seen in Orison and Loreville. We've heard from Assistant Design Director Dan Truffin on this system ever since fall of 2020, when they started to design it, and we've gotten sneak peeks at how power will work with the interactables we have access to since then. Now, we will get our first in-depth explanation of how players will ultimately control the life-supporting systems in locations via missions or sandbox gameplay. Don't miss this one. The last panel of the day is the one we can most expect, Ship Talk, where the devs talk ship. It is the most consistent panel in CitizenCon, which makes sense as CIG is always most consistent with ship events. In this panel, we'll have the biggest names in ship development talk about upcoming concepts and flight-ready ships. We will likely hear a detail or teaser about one of the unannounced ships likely releasing with the next update, as well as get to vote on which ships the community would like to see CIG develop. This is the panel I'm least excited for, but it is nice to see something consistent between all of the events year after year making a comeback. I personally have no predictions as to what ships might be shown, but I certainly hope we get to hear about the Crucible repair platform. Overall, the panels this year look interesting and well-rounded, but I still feel this event does not do what it really needs to. CitizenCon needs to be our annual all-hands-on-deck update on where the game is headed in the next year, considering the important aspects. I hope that in the future CIG makes sure to include major discussions surrounding AI, the quantum economy system, and the new professions being worked on. I also would love to see time dedicated to the major pieces of back-end tech like server meshing, the Gen 12 renderer, and the subsumption system. But considering we've had pretty regular coverage on most of those things, I can understand why they're omitted. As we continue through the years, this event becomes more and more well-defined and to the point. And I'm happy to see that continue this year with no major keynote and a selection of hard-hitting topics that will help define where the game is heading. Hopefully the team is able to avoid any major mistakes this year and deliver some good information that satisfies everybody with this one. And hopefully the goals they set out here can be achieved within the next year. Because that's what we should be seeing, the next year of Star Citizen. I know this is looking at the same star system as last year, but keep in mind the actual gameplay looks to be wildly different than what was shared at the time. The final thing to look out for are estimates of delivery. Almost every panel here labels itself with the 4.0 moniker. This may not mean these additions are all planned for 4.0, but it is heavily implied. So they should definitely confirm whether that is the case or not at the event. I hope this video got you prepared and maybe mildly hyped for the event, and maybe even taught you something new. If you'd like the full live analysis of all the goings on, along with the chance to win some ship giveaways and chat with the community, join my live stream on October 8th to enjoy it with the Garden. And stick around afterwards for a pretty special surprise. The link to RSVP to that stream is down in the video description. I'd like to thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you there.